What's going on, everybody? This is Clint with the Die Hard MMA podcast. This podcast was filmed exclusively for odds.com. Be sure to click the link below. Check it out. We've got everything that you need over there. We've got you covered for every sport. Thank you so much for the support and good luck on all your action this week. Here we go.
Let's keep it moving.
Good disagreement there. Let's move this along so we don't, take 4 hours tonight because this card is big.
It is.
Featherweight fight coming up here. Jared Flash Gordon taking on Danny Chavez. Jared Gordon is 16-4. Danny Chavez 11-3. And I don't have very many bets on this card, James, but I will tell you, this is the one that I have already bet. This is the one that I've already tweeted out. This is the pick that I like. I'm on Danny Chavez at -135. Jared Gordon is a fighter that I have stamped fade on. I do not want to back this man. He's a hard-nosed grappler, great wrestling skills, but he has huge durability problems. This guy does not have a chin, and he's been knocked out 4 times. He's training at Rufus Sport, which is a gym that I'm also looking to fade. They're on a bit of a skid. They're on a bit of a downslide, and they just don't seem to make the right choices and adjustments round to round in the midst of fights. Danny Chavez, he's relatively new to the UFC, but this guy's got incredibly fast hands. He's got solid power, accurate punches, and really hard leg kicks. To top it all off, he's a fantastic grappler himself, and he likes to use that Chuck Liddell style to keep the fight standing. He doesn't want to take his opponent down, but he wants to keep this thing up on the feet where he can pop people in the face. And on top of that, he's going to be just a little bit shorter than Jared Gordon, which anybody who knows wrestling knows that you have to have the lowest hips out of the two fighters, and I think that's a huge advantage in this spot. The fact that Jared Gordon is going to have a harder time getting under the hips of Danny Chavez, in my opinion, adds to his takedown defense. I think Danny Chavez is going to knock Jared Gordon out, James. How do you feel about this fight?
Oh, this is great. We're going to disagree 2 times in a row. This is
Yes.
perfect. So I want to correct you there. Jared Gordon is not at Rufus Sport. He hasn't been at Rufus Sport for a while. He actually moved up to Florida. His fiance lives there. He's been at Sanford MMA the last 2 camps, including the Chris Fishgold fight. That's why he looks so good in that fight, I think, is because he's finally at a camp where he's working with guys. Like it's just a better fit for him at this point. And you're right. A lot of people who live in Rufus Sport these days, not sure what's in the water there, but I think Sanford's been a much better camp. That's actually the reason that Brendan Allen is training at Sanford as well, due to Jared Gordon being like, hey, come out here. We got some big bodies. You can work with some guys there as well. So, and I want to put some context on this because yes, Jared Gordon has durability issues, but you got to look at who he's losing to, man. Diego Ferreira, Joaquim Silva, Charles Oliveira. Are you kidding me? This guy might be fighting for the title soon. And he's lost 2 fights ago to one of the best fighters in the UFC right now, Charles Oliveira. So I think context is important as well. I was so impressed with Jared Gordon's win over Chris Fishgold in a fight that I picked against Jared Gordon. And Jared had every reason to lose that fight. It was in Abu Dhabi. His wife his fiance had a miscarriage. I don't know if people knew that. He had a lot of adversity to deal with going into that fight, including his corner not being there. Do you remember that? They got COVID. So Paul Felder had to step out of the commentary booth.
I do remember that.
Same with Eric Nixick. So just to show the type of adversity, I mean, we know Jared's story as well, coming from, really tough upbringing and some of the stuff he's had to overcome. I mean, just that, to put on that type of dominant performance over a Chris Fishgold really impressed me. And I never thought we'd see Jared Gordon back at featherweight again. And it was actually Duke Rufus who said, don't go to featherweight. It's too much of a cut. But Jared seems to have figured that cut out. And I think the fact that he's had, a lot of notice for this fight, it's been, from what I know, both fighters have known about this for a while, at least since before the holidays. I think is going to, favor Gordon well. But like you mentioned, Danny Chavez, a guy that I've underestimated as well. He actually gave me crap for it in our interview. I interviewed both fighters, but he was cool. That interview. He was like, Danny was basically like, he's like, look, man, even you picked against me. But and by the way, if you're a fighter out there and you're watching me and making my picks, like, look, there's like, I'm just doing my job. It's not like I'm not trying to be disrespectful. Most fighters are cool about it, but then you get the odd ones that are upset. But in general, I try and be as, when I'm trying to break down fights, as you guys can see here, I try and be respectful. So if a fighter's got a problem, if they know me well enough, they know I'm not coming from a place of disrespect. So anyways, Danny Chavez, big win over TJ Brown. The fight before that actually was even more impressive. Dylan Calla, this is a training partner of Brian Barberena. I've been hearing Dylan Calla's name for a long time. He was sort of thought of as a guy to make the UFC. It hasn't really panned out that way, but he finished Dylan in the very first round. That's the fight that got him the ticket to the UFC. This is actually a battle of Florida because Chavez trains at MMA Masters. Jared Gordon at Sanford MMA. So it'll be interesting to see. And again, Jared has Chaz Skelly on this card. Chavez has Rafael Alves on this card as well. Another little tidbit there. But this I see as a pick'em, but I think Jared Gordon's going to edge this one out. And what I sort of go off of is just not only cage experience in the octagon, but also the fact that I think Jared has found his calling as a featherweight. If you remember, he had issues in his debut fighting Mitchell Quinones. I think he actually ended up missing weight for that fight. Yeah, he was 149, but he's figured that out. And you know what? 145 is a much better weight class for Jared Gordon. I think he's more powerful. I think he's going to, be able to use some of his tools a little bit better. When he was at 155, I mean, fighting a guy in Oliveira who's just ginormous for the weight class anyways, that's a tough ask, right? So I like Gordon here. Could Chavez pull off the upset? Absolutely. I ate some crow for sure when I picked TJ Brown against Chavez. It could absolutely happen here, but I think Gordon takes it. I feel pretty good about him going out there, putting on another good performance here. And yeah, a little bit of a layoff, since July of last year coming in there. I guess same thing with Chavez as well, hasn't fought since August, but I'm taking Jared Gordon here. He's had a full camp. He's getting to work with guys at Sanford like, Adam Borax and, Skelly's there. And there's a lot of just high-level training partners there. I think it's a much better fit for him. I think we're going to see another good performance from Jared Gordon, like the Chris Fishgold fight. Tell me what you think about that, Clint.
Okay. So the thing, I guess, is he's got to prove it to me, James. I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is until he shows me I'm wrong. And the Chris Fishgold fight, I bet on Chris Fishgold that night. I took my shot there. And what I've got to say is Fishgold, he's not a striker. He doesn't have a lot of power in his hands. Now, if he lands perfect, then okay, sure, he can hurt some people. And that was part of my justification for making that bet, is that he does have some underrated power, but he's only got 2 knockouts. He's mostly a submission guy. Chris Fishgold is more than willing to play off of his back, and that's the perfect opponent for a Jared Gordon. This is a spot that I missed. Jared Gordon was set for a bounce back against a guy who was willing to roll to his back and let him wrestle. And that's what we got. He stayed on top of a guy who was willing to accept the takedown every single time, and that's the exact opposite of Chavez. Chavez will not give up the takedown. Jared Gordon's going to have to make that takedown. He's going to have to dominate the grappling to get that takedown, and I don't know if he can do that. I know he's a good wrestler, but I think that Danny Chavez is going to make this interesting. And on top of that, Gordon is not a finisher. So if this gets into the second round, the third round, can he keep those takedowns up? Danny Chavez has got a good gas tank, and he's got really strong hips. Late in that fight, he's going to make those takedowns harder and harder and harder. And because of that, I think we see a round 2 or a round 3 knockout. When Gordon starts struggling to get those takedowns, when he starts getting a little gassed, a little bit tired, and then he keeps running into the brick wall of Chavez. Next time you interview Chavez, you'll have to let him know that I called the round 3 knockout.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see. Yeah, it's going to be, it's a close, and the odds indicate that, right? I mean, there's no like clear favorite here, and I think it's a good test for both guys. Chavez. Oh, by the way, one other thing I wanted to mention that I like that Chavez said, he's pretty realistic about his career. He's 33 years old. He's like, look, like, I got to take these tough fights. If I ever want to be a champion, my time's now. I build me up type thing. I like that attitude from him. And I think Gordon sort of knows the same thing here. Like, Gordon's a guy that I think will be fine when his fighting career is over. He's a pretty popular guy. I know very well respected in the industry as well, whether it's, commentary or something else after this. But I think both guys are kind of at a stage where it's like, okay, we got to make some movement. That's where the matchmaking here is on point.
That's fair. And, I like that attitude as well. And I think the UFC, this is not quite what we talked about before with prospect versus prospect, but they want to see who's sticking around. Because like you said, Danny Chavez is 31. Jared Gordon is 32. If either of these guys are going to make a run at it, if either of these guys are going to make a real career of it, they got to do it now. And both of them, Danny Chavez just getting to the UFC, Gordon being up and down in the UFC, it's not a walking papers fight. I don't think anybody's getting cut from the UFC in this fight, but it's definitely an opposing directions fight. One of these guys is going to get the fast track. The other one is going to be the next stepping stone for the UFC until they lose to a couple of up and comers and then they get cut.
Well said. Yeah, I agree.
All right. We finally have made it to the final fight of the preliminary card, one that I'm very excited about talking about. 390 live viewers. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us this evening. We appreciate it. This is odds.com.